All right, so for those that were able to get back in, please again post your full name and address, and if you'd like to speak or if you don't want to speak, we can read your question out loud. That's fine too. All right, let me see here. Most of the stuff is about the link.
Were you able to get, Mike, the questions from the earlier Q&A?
Yeah, let me get to my email here from Owen. So I have a question from Kevin Stoddard, 6 Baker Road. Let me see if Kevin is back with us. It looks like he is. I see him here twice. I will try the first one. Kevin, can you hear me? You need to unmute.
Mike, how's this?
There we go. Okay, we have Kevin Stoddard with us, and he has a question regarding COVID-19.
Yeah, so my question kind of is, since the design process started before February when COVID kind of kicked in, have there been changes to the design of the building or the HVAC systems, or should we expect changes to come later that incorporate best practices post-COVID in terms of design build? Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll hand that over to Larry, but my experience, my understanding is there haven't been major new changes to how schools are being designed. I know there are people looking at the potential of going to a higher level of filtration on the handling systems, but Larry, maybe you should chime in on this one.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's very much an open question. As most people are aware, it's really an emerging situation that we're all dealing with, as we all just experienced. And right now, so looking at it a couple different ways. So first of all, schematic design is the next phase of the project, and is really when we dig into the physical reality of the building, and that includes mechanical systems, as Mike is pointing out. So there is still time to do that. And we will be looking at that carefully in the next round of work once we get through the PSR and through the MSBA board approval starting roughly in January. In the meantime, we have not received a lot of guidance from the MSBA on COVID-19 changes. I think they, like many of us, are dealing with it as a sort of temporary condition that we will hopefully soon be out of. But as it goes longer and longer, it remains to be seen if they will be providing guidance on their standards for spaces and otherwise that we would then begin to take into account as we go through the next round of design. And finally, on the mechanical systems, there's very much interest in, we're doing a number of studies now for retrofitting schools that are kind of, again, people are being caught in this new world that we're living in. The displacement system that is pretty standard procedure for most new buildings these days actually works pretty well. What ends up happening is the air comes in at the bottom of the room and it migrates up through the individuals and then is exhausted out of the top of the room, and it's done once and it goes out to the atmosphere. So there's many folks who are saying that's a lot better in terms of COVID spread than the typical system that many of you used to, where the air comes in at the ceiling, is mixed around, and then is exhausted again at the ceiling. And you can imagine the virus spread on that can be higher than a diffused system. So in many ways, the new school design is heading in the right direction, but it remains to be seen as to how far that will go over the next 6 months or a year as we dig into it further.
All right. We have a question from Ken Manning, 11 Pueblo Road. Let me see if Ken is still with us. He is. Ken, would you like to pose your question?
I don't know. I don't remember the exact wording. Do you have it in front
You
of
can
you?
read it if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Thanks.
So the question is the committee now proposing no public commentary and or questions on the day of the vote?
Okay. Sorry.
Um,
No, that's not that's my second question. So the first question I had before the whole Zoom meeting fell apart was a clarification, really. So if we go with the Wheelock site, my understanding is we create a new and related question of what do we do with the old Dale Street buildings and site. However, if we go with the current Dale Street site, we don't have this question of what do we do with this old set of buildings. Is my understanding correct here?
So partially, all of the options that we looked at, only two of them actually involve keeping the existing school in the existing building. One is the base repair option, which really doesn't work from an education perspective. It's really there for the MSBA as a comparison point because it doesn't provide the growth that's needed and it just brings the current building up to code. So it doesn't allow for the growth in enrollment that is projected. So that's really not usually an option that's considered. It's not really, it's really there as a comparative tool. Then the ad reno scheme on the Dale Street site, it would be the only viable option that includes keeping the school in the school as it exists today. Then there are two options for placing a new building in the field behind Dale Street, between Dale Street and Memorial. And then there are two options on the Wheelock site, which are basically towards the backside of Wheelock, where the secondary fields are. And one of those options kind of wraps around towards the front. So the answer is that there are most of the options for new building would require some future disposition of the Dale Street School. As I noted previously, it can be mothballed. It could be reused as park and rec. It's been considered for senior housing, and it's been considered for partial demo, and it could be also swing space should some of the schools see more growth than we expect, or sooner growth than we expect. So unfortunately, there's no defined answer for that, but those are the options that are on the table right now.
I think, though, directionally, Mike, I think the answer to Ken's question is yes, right? I mean, if we build at Dale Street, there'll be fewer decisions to make with whatever land is left at Dale Street. I mean, I think you can view that as either a positive if you want to reduce the number of options we have, or a negative if you think that there are other positive uses to the site that would enhance the town. And again, I'm not expressing a view one way or the other, but I think it is true that the more you did at Dale Street, the less you could do with it just by definition, because you would have already decided some of those things.
Yep,
and some of the demolition costs for the building would be factored into this project if the school were built at Dale Street.
I'll just if I can just follow up on that. I have to admit, I was one of those people in the survey who kind of needed more information and was, not set on one way or the other. But I have to confess, I have hospital fatigue in terms of, what are we going to do with this? And I just worry that ends up happening now with the Dale Street location potentially. And so that and the concerns of being, a little further from town, I'm leaning more to the Dale Street location because I do worry about the issues of now what do we do with this location, and the years of debate and potential issues that could emerge from that. Thank you for answering that question for me.
No problem. And just to answer your second question, we will not be voting tonight. We are going to continue with public commentary, and then we'll schedule another time for more public commentary for those that may not have a chance to.
Thank you.
All right. There's one other question on what Owen sent me, but I don't see her back in the chat. I'm in the participants. I'll read it and then we can, if she's able to get on next time. But there was one question from a Mary Cusano of 98 North Street. She asked about the $95 million price tag. Was that for both schools projects? And just to be clear, I believe that was for one of the larger grade configurations, not one of 4 or 5 grade configurations. And unless there's people in here who really want to fight hard for 3 to 5, I would expect we would probably continue with the school committee's guidance. And that would be this is just for this project. The budgets that were put up were just for this project. Though I think maybe the confusion is that on the Wheelock site, there would be some site improvements out in front of Wheelock School that would see the benefit of this project, which is leading to some higher costs. But we felt that it would be a disservice to the project to not fix up the Wheelock bus drop-off loop and parent drop-off loop and leave those in better condition, despite having put in $70 million or $75 million into a new school on that site. So that's one of the reasons why that site is more expensive. All right, I'm going to jump back to the Q&A here. All right, so it looks like everybody's been giving a chance to answer their first questions. I do have a couple of repeat questions from repeat askers. So another question from Baron Leger, and I'll just read it off, but unless Baron, let me know if you want to speak on it. But earlier question was the recommended 4-5 configuration. Is there any implication on site selection for potential future growth at either location? The long and the short of it is on the Dale Street site, both projects, let me start with both projects, the MSBA requires that we have a plan for a 15% growth as an addition to the project. So that's a requirement of the MSBA that needs to be planned into any project that gets put forward. So we always have to plan in some growth into any building. That said, the Wheelock site would have the potential for more growth given its more space, and that a new building on the Dale Street site would then be confined by Memorial and the existing Dale Street School. The long and the short of it, from my perspective, is that there will be some growth built into any project, and there may be slightly more availability on the Wheelock side, as well as for the Wheelock School itself, which may be another project 20 years from now. Anyone else want to chime in on that before I move on?
Mike, I think there was a question about could a 3rd floor be added to the building later, and I think although anything is possible, the amount of costs and disruptions to the school would be significant. So I know there was a question, could we add a floor later? And the answer is it's very difficult. It's much easier to go out than to go up.
All right. So I've got Chris McCue Potts. I'm going to allow you to speak. She has questions about process and bigger town picture. So Not exactly sure what that means. So let's see. All right, Chris, you're on.
Hi, yeah. So, I've attended all these meetings and I've been looking at the criteria matrix, that was filled out and discussed tonight. I think back to the April meeting when the selectmen had the joint meeting with you guys and had it with the warrant committee and the school committee. And there's just a number of steps along the way that I feel like this process has really not actually been focused on engaging the community. I mean, I think a meeting like tonight where, we had to beg and plead to actually have time on the agenda for public input. And we should have actually had the opportunity to see those criteria matrix in advance and to be able to ask and actually be able to hear the committee itself, members of the committee talk about why they filled out the matrix the way they did. I mean, I'd like to hear from Tim Bonifati. I'd like to hear from Tom Erb. I'd like to hear from Mike Weber. I'd like to hear from individual members of this committee, hear them discuss live and in person how they came to their own sort of conclusions with this criteria matrix. And now to have the matrix presented tonight without public access to it, and then all of a sudden a vote planned on the same night, it just doesn't seem right in terms of how this project is being pushed so forcefully forward without enough ability for the community to be able to look at this information in advance and actually ask thoughtful questions and hear what the committee has to say. And I will go back to that meeting back in April. Mike Marcucci, Gus, Pete. Pete even said with the grade configuration decision, he would have liked to have seen the time set aside at the town meeting for that, because he felt that the face-to-face questions and the answers were really important. And Mike, you said that on 2 or 3 occasions, that you felt that the face-to-face was important. You felt like you wanted to be able to have the back and forth, and have the community engagement in place before any of the committees voted. I mean, I went back and looked at the meeting clips, and I have I have the clips of all the comments that were made at that meeting, and it was clear. Gus agreed with Pete in terms of the need to have deeper discussion about the various criteria that's being evaluated before these votes are taken. And I feel like tonight, this vote was going to be pushed through so hard. I shouldn't have had to launch a petition to ask for public input to be on the agenda tonight. It's just, for a project we keep hearing that this project is one of the largest, building projects that the town is going to ever see, and yet you couldn't even set aside time for a separate forum so that people could be heard and questions could be asked and we could actually hear from the committee members before votes are being taken. I mean, we don't even know, so much of what was presented tonight still had the 3, 4, 5 configuration on the slides. We should have actually dug deeper on the grade 4 and 5 configuration. I mean, I'd like to hear about the educational benefits of just 4 and 5 alone. I just feel like from a process standpoint that the public engagement, the community engagement is getting severely shortchanged on this project.
Chris, I have to respond to this. We've had Zoom meetings. I have been on with many people in this room on Zoom meetings for the last 6 months. We have had record numbers of attendance at meetings, after meeting about this project and other projects going on in the town. You have personally published and publicized aspect after aspect of this, and people continue to come, as many who are interested to do so. So I'm a little troubled on how you're feeling that this has been a cloak and dagger operation to jam a project.
Leo, I did not say that. All I'm saying is on the site selection vote, There was an original plan to have more public engagement, specifically on the site selection vote. There was
Yes.
a plan to do a forum on grade configuration, and there was a plan to do a forum on the site selection vote.
Well, you don't
So
get to
now-
stand up here and accuse us of being secretive and trying to jam anything through when we have
I'm
been
not
extremely
making any
open.
accusations. All I'm saying is that
I'm
this,
going to ask the chair to cut off this comment at this point and then respond to her questions. Thank you.
Oh, I haven't heard a question yet. Chris, do you have a question?
She asked why there was the 3 to 5
Well, I
is
also
still
have-
on the configurations.
but I also have a very significant question in terms of the larger town picture. Okay, we're
Okay,
going to
hold on 1 second, Chris. All right, let us give us a chance to respond to the 3 to 5 because that's a simple answer. The fact is, the school committee voted on the 4 to 5. This group, as a public body, has not taken action on it. So I specifically told the team to keep it on there because I don't know and I haven't gotten the full opinions of my colleagues on this committee about whether that is something that they would support. If they chose and they wanted to support to vote the 3 to 5 in, and we'd have an issue, but that's within their right to do so. So that is exactly why the 3 to 5 is still on there. Now, do I expect that to happen? I don't, but you know, that again is up to my colleagues on this committee. You said you had another question about the town, so I'm going to give you another opportunity, but please ask the question and not make further just sort of blatant accusations.
my question was not an accusation, and I apologize if that's the way it came across because that was not the case. My question was, what happened to the 2 questions I have are what happened to the community engagement piece on the site selection? That had originally been part of the plan. I heard that. I sat in on those communications subcommittee meetings. This is a significant decision. And so I'm wondering what happened to that community engagement piece on this specific decision. And then the second question I have has to do with the water protection piece of the Wheelock property. And I'm kind of confused that from the evaluation, the site selection matrix, that despite the fact that we have gotten reports from Mass Department of MDEP, we have this partnership with Neponset Valley Reservation Watershed. We have made commitments to protect our water resources. We're going to be spending a significant amount of money on water filtration systems. And yet, when I look
Can I respond to that now?
But wait a minute, let me just finish the question. But when I look at the documents that we're committing our partnerships to, the recommendation is to keep that land, to not develop around our well protection district. So I'm trying to understand why we can rationalize building on that site, given the water sensitivities that we're dealing with right now, and our commitment to our watershed partners that we will protect our water supply.
Okay, so 2 things on that. One, I think it's disingenuous that you bring water protection up for that site and not the Dale Street. They are both, let me be clear, they are both in aquifer protection districts. Building in an aquifer protection district is quite common. And the aquifer protection district is not there to prevent building, it's to prevent certain hazardous uses from occurring on those sites. It's to prevent stormwater runoff from not being handled properly on those sites. I know, and I answered this for you back in March.
Dale Street is not in a well protection district.
I'm going to mute you, Chris. I answered this back in March, okay? And you decided that you would go to the Board of Health to try to make it a public health hazard to build on this site, which they subsequently denied to do, okay? The fact remains that there is nothing on the Aquifer Protection District or the Well Protection District that would be under a hazardous use by building a school there. We are not storing petrochemicals. We are not building a dry cleaner. This is not a hazardous use. It does require further detail in the permitting process, all of which we would go through. There is no risk to making, like somehow building a school there is a huge risk to our watershed. I'm sorry, and I responded to this, the Board of Health responded to this, and you keep perpetuating this, and it's trying to scare people for no reason, in my opinion. So for that, I'm going to leave that question and consider that one answered. Okay. So I do have one more question from Jerry Potts, which I will allow Jerry a chance to answer or to speak. Jerry, I have one more question from you regarding the cost difference between Dale and Wheelock.
Yeah, Mike, and thanks for coming back on the call and giving us a chance. I appreciate you giving us an opportunity to ask the questions. This is me not being speed reading fast enough on that grid, so I apologize. I just want to make sure I understand the cost differential for new construction between the two buildings and the two locations. I just want to make sure I understand that number one. And then also, if traffic isn't going to be significantly increased, why is a traffic light needed up there? I mean, again, I'm still trying to grasp with it because I'm on this side. I'm a South Sider too, and the cut throughs on Curve and the current traffic we have. I'm having a hard time that there wouldn't be more traffic there. But I think the light sort of vindicates that there might be some more. But any
That's correct. I know I certainly didn't say there would not be more traffic. There certainly will not be more bus traffic. I know that because all the buses do go to all the elementary schools.
Right.
In terms of parent drop-off traffic, that would see an increase in the morning and in the afternoon. But given our current status, where I believe it's upwards of 85 to 90% of our kids are arriving via bus, and I'm hopeful that continues when this building comes online in 2024, with COVID hopefully being an ancient history at that time. But those current numbers, so you're looking at 10 to 15% of the kids would see an increase from Dale Street would see an increase to that area. So there would be some increase in traffic. And we haven't been able to do a traffic study because of COVID. We will be doing a traffic study, and that may decide that opportunity to help with the traffic issues coming in and out of Elm Street onto South would be to add a traffic light at that location. So in an abundance of caution for that option, we carried the improvement of that intersection with a traffic light, such that if the traffic study comes out and says that some improvement is needed, that would be the method we would go about achieving it. In terms of other reasons why that site is more expensive, as noted in the graph, which again, this will all be posted tonight, so you can look at in more depth. Sorry, it may be posted in the morning, but the information from tonight will be posted. The site improvements at Wheelock is a larger site, and again, we felt it would be crazy to just tuck a little road in to get back to the Wheelock building. It doesn't solve some of the problems that are on that site from a circulation perspective for both parent drop-off and buses. So there is an improvement to the parking and bus drop-off loop, such that there would be one bus drop-off loop for both schools, and an improvement to the parking and parent drop-off loops such that there would be separate parent drop-off loops for each school. So that amounts to about $2 million in hard cost, and then that gets marked up for project costs. So that, and then the third thing is the water line, which does require some more investigation. We do need to talk with Mo Goulet a little bit, but right now he's saying there's about a mile of pipe that's 6-inch pipe that needs to be upgraded to 8-inch on the water line. I think someone mentioned sewer. It's not sewer, it's water supply. Make sure we have the right water pressure within the building for both the plumbing and for the fire protection. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I believe it's somewhere between 2 and 4, or maybe at the most 5 million difference between them, depending on which option on each site is chosen.
Thanks, Mike.
No problem.
I'll say one other thing about that, Mike, too. As someone who's dropped off their kids at both schools on a regular basis, it would have saved me a lot of time to be at the right to have the schools right next to each other. So it'd still be the same. Many times they're going to be the same number of cars going to the same schools. And we don't know. If I remember correctly, Larry, you had mentioned that the traffic study the light was just in there just in case.
Yeah, and I think just to put a little point on that, the traffic study, when we can do that, which is always a good question at this point, looks at specific times of the day when traffic is building up. And what you may find is that the commuter traffic through that intersection is actually quite high before school even starts.
Oh, yeah.
That's often what we find, or that it's quite high in the evening after school has departed for the day. So that would be part of our understanding and traffic look to understand when is it happening, and then what is the impact, how many cars are trying to turn, what impacts are they to turning, and so forth. So we put that in, as Mike says, under an abundance of caution. It could be a project cost, and we wanted to count it early. It's easier to take out if it turns out we don't need it than to put it in later if it turns out we need it. But I wouldn't use the allowance as proof that somehow we're going to have to put a traffic light in as yet. I think that's still to be determined.
I think that's something that we've looked at, that was an issue several years ago. I know Richard Disorder was interested in putting in a traffic light there. And the focus was primarily on the evening commute, people heading back home and out in the Norfolk direction. The conclusion that we reached.
This would be, Mike, sorry to cut you off, but this isn't the South Street and High Street intersection. This would be South and Elm.
Oh, at the corner of Elm and Wheelock?
Yeah, Elm and South, because what happens is, and I know this can happen, especially around the evening commute, is that stop sign gets backed up, and you get people that use Knollwood as a cut through that get backed up on Knollwood, and so a light there to allow for traffic to come off of Elm and onto South during school afternoon release would help to alleviate some of the traffic from backing up into the neighborhoods.
Got it. Okay.
Right. But again, if you think of school finishing up at 3 o'clock-ish, 4 o'clock-ish, versus if the heavy traffic is at 5:30 or 6, then you may not need a traffic signal, or it may be that there just needs to be a turning lane or some other minor improvements that help to get traffic flowing through that intersection.
All right. All of the questions that have been posed have been responded to. Obviously, we're going to be in touch to reschedule the remainder of this meeting. Not exactly sure where that's going to go, but I'll be in touch just to get scheduling on that. So I apologize for the technical difficulties. These are the challenges of COVID-19, I guess, and doing these remote meetings. But that said, I think we've got a lot of good questions, and hopefully we provided some good information to the people that showed up tonight. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Jeff and a second from Leo. So I'll run it through. Anna Mae?
Yes.
Mike Marcucci?
Yep.
Mike Weber?
Yes.
Leo Brem?
Yes.
Walt Kincaid?
Yes.
Tom Erb?
Yes.
Tim Bonfatti?
Yes.
And Jeff Marsden?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening.